Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. Welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives in the world's leading global brands. Today, we're joined by Curt White, who's the Senior Vice President and Chief HR Officer at Array Information Technology. Welcome to the show, Curt. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks for joining us. Before we jump in, tell everyone a little bit more about yourself and your organization and your journey to where we are today.
Well, a little bit about me. I have been in the HR field for better than 20 years. I've spent time behind the desk as an HR practitioner and then in front of clients and consulting firms as a human capital practitioner, providing HR solutions. I live in Northern Virginia in the United States. I happen to live in an area just outside of the capital, Washington, D.C., where we've had the privilege of last couple of decades of really good economic growth, kind of insulated here with the government being here and all the political institutions here. The economy's been good. The HR field has experienced quite a bit of growth in the Washington area. It's been a great place to be if you're an HR practitioner. And so it's good. I've come to the right place. Currently, I'm with a company called Array Information Technology. We are an IT services company. We provide solutions primarily to, in the public sector, to the Defense Department. In layman's terms, a lot of what we do are applications development. So we develop systems, interfaces, cloud technologies to help the Defense Department track things like logistics, inventory systems, and so on. I've been with Array since almost a year and a half. Array is going through a lot of changes. We had an ownership change a couple of years ago. The owners wanted to take the company and retain some of the cultural aspects that existed before the change, and then implement others to help kind of fuel a growth strategy. So we've hired some new people, myself included, to kind of help with that. So I'm glad to be here. It's a great company, terrific culture, outstanding leadership, and it's a good place for me to be at this point in my career.
Fantastic. And what was it about, to start from again, what was it about attracted you back from the dark side? You went into consulting, started off as a practitioner, went to work there, sold, was on the other end of the spectrum. That must have been very interesting for you. What was it that attracted you to this new role? Said, I want to go back to actually leading a HR function now.
I'm just one of those kind of HR people that enjoys the operational aspect of business. I grew up, my father had a factory. I grew up in what we call the rural Midwestern part of the United States. So I grew up in a manufacturing kind of environment, exposed to production systems. And at one point I thought that's what I was going to be, was a factory owner overseeing the production of all kinds of pieces.
As a kid, is that what you were growing up as a kid? That's what you thought you were going to be? So interesting.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I could tell you a lot of stories about what it's like being in factories and producing nuts and bolts and all kinds of different components for.
That's so foreign to me, though. Like, obviously, that's what you grew up in, so it was so, to you, that was normal, right? Whereas to me, that seems so foreign, wanting to grow up and work in a factory and manufacture. But that was really what you grew up around.
Well, and that was the Midwestern United States industry for decades, and things started getting outsourced to other parts of the country because of the reductions in labor costs and so on. So a lot of those companies, most of them don't exist anymore, including my father's company. Just couldn't compete with the changes in the global economy. But I grew up in that environment and went to school, and eventually I found my way to the Washington, D.C. area. I followed a girl here.
As always, that's a typical story, right?
Yes, and I'm happy to say it was a good choice. We just had our 33rd.
Oh, amazing.
But
like
it is.
I thought I was doing well with 15 years. I've still got you're double on me, so I've still got a long way to go.
But I'll tell you something, it gets better every year. So,
Oh.
Anyway, so that kind of lays a backdrop. I grew up in manufacturing, and I like being in front of customers. I like developing solutions. I like doing pricing. I like pitching solutions. It's just kind of me. I have that in my blood. I have that operation sort of line management gene that runs through my blood.
Mm-hmm.
Also an HR person, which means I like to be behind the desk. I like to help employees. I like to help with the cultural components of organizational development. So for me, I've been comfortable moving in front of and behind the desk several times throughout my career. And candidly, it's been refreshing. And at the same time, I think the experience has been helpful. If I move in as a consultant, I already have practical experience as an HR practitioner to bring to bear. It's not just academic knowledge or knowledge
You've been there, you've done it, you've sat in the seat, you understand the
That's
language.
exactly right. That's exactly right. And then coming back behind the desk, I bring sort of that consultative approach and exposure to some of the leading edge, thought leadership and solutions that I can bring to bear on the companies that I work for.
Yeah.
So I have been very fortunate to be able to have this sort of rotational experience in my career, and I think it's been beneficial.
Yeah. Was that intentional? So for other leaders, HR leaders listening to the show that are on their career journey, would you recommend that it's important for them to take time out, work within different, not just outside in a consulting company, but maybe in a different department in the business? Maybe go and work in operations, marketing, sales, and get a better understanding, and also outside in consulting. Was that intentional on your behalf or just completely coincidental?
It was coincidental. I'll answer your question and then give you a little bit of an anecdote. But yes, I would absolutely strongly encourage HR practitioners to have a rotational assignment somewhere else within the business. It could be in another functional area within the business, or it could be in a customer-facing role on the operations end of the business. The experience is invaluable, and it gives you credibility with your company as well. But I'll tell you what happened with me. I was working at a company in the mid to late 90s, actually with the CEO of the current company. He and I were young guys at the time, and we were actually working for his father in his father's company. And I was the HR person there. We lost a senior program executive, customer-facing role on one of our programs. And the CEO of the company came to me and said, I'm going to put you in that program management role while you look for a replacement. I think he said something like, because I know that will make you look for a replacement faster.
Because like you don't want to do the sales role, so the quicker.
Exactly.
That's a good. That's it's very cheeky.
Yes, but I think he also recognized I had some skills that were valuable for the role. It happened to be a role where we lost managers repeatedly with this particular company that we were supporting, and in this particular assignment, because we were putting engineering talent into a role that required administrative skills. So I went in, met the customer, and essentially what I had to do was straighten out several months worth of administrative and invoicing issues and deal with personnel issues, getting people assigned to the right jobs and hiring. Again, it was more of an administrative task than it was in engineering. It turned out to be a great role. I loved it. I loved the customers. We ended up having a long-term positive relationship that lasted for years, and it sort of just set the stage for me. It flipped a switch, and I was like, man, I really like being out here with customers, working with them, finding ways to solve their problems and helping them achieve their own goals and mission. And that was the first of many times in my career I've rotated in and out of customer-facing roles. And the experience, again, has just been absolutely invaluable to me.
Yeah, on that point then, because obviously today we're talking about reposition HR to support the business strategy. How has that helped you do that? How has that experience helped you? Because part of this is also selling it to the business, right? You're going to the team, to the board saying, here's my, based on the direction of the business, where we're going, here's my HR strategy to support the business. Part of that is also a sell.
This is true. This is true. There are a lot of aspects to trying to help align what you do as an HR organization with the direction of the business. It's helped in a number of ways, Chris. First of all, it's helped me understand that you really need to listen, and it's critically important to understand what the customer's pain points and needs are. You know, as HR practitioners, all too often, we might be well-intended and have a lot of subject matter expertise and potentially try to superimpose a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. And when you've spent time with customers who are also serving others, and you listen and you try to really understand, and through a consultative approach, what it is that the customer needs and expects from you, you know, that's invaluable in terms of crafting the solution that will make a difference for the customer and help make them successful. The experience has also helped me understand the different components of serving customers and running operations that I might not have otherwise had. For instance, pricing. What goes into pricing? What are the different aspects of it? How is profitability affected? You know, as HR people, we're often trained to be very knowledgeable about the impact of, say, fringe and other overhead expenses on a company's financial statements. But what about changes in labor or labor rates or cost of living or labor in other locations? There's just a host of factors financially and otherwise that, until you actually get out in front of customers and have that line management and P&L responsibility, you may or may not actually understand what's going on. And when you do, you can craft a solution that not only solves a need on the surface, but it solves a real strategic need, which is to maintain, for instance, a certain EBITDA level, right? So if you're staffing a job, if you're implementing new tools to improve workflow or processes, or you're training managers on how to do a better job at feedback and so on, in your mind, you need to be thinking, what is it in the end that's critically important to us? EBITDA is a big thing in the business world now. You know, how do you keep those margins at a respectable level, but at the same time integrate in those solutions that you need to get you there?
Yeah.
Again, if you haven't spent time as a customer-facing person in a P&L role, you get an appreciation for those things that are very, very important.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely, and all of the CHROs I speak to at the highest level, I have those discussions and conversations. But you know, it's lower down, also, even depending on the organizations, could be far away from having that type of conversation as well. So super important. That you do that. So the opportunity with Array, what was the sort of challenge they were facing? Obviously, they hired yourself in and a number of other leaders to help them through this transformation and this new business direction. What was the key challenge that they're facing, and how are you helping them as the HR leader?
Well, when I was hired in, Array had already created a platform, a cultural platform that was very important for them to retain coming out of the sale of the business. The company has always been employee-centric, family-oriented, wanting to have the work-life balance, wanting people to feel respected, and so on. That's been a main thread woven through the fabric of the culture for years, long before I showed up. But after I came to work here, or about the time I was hired, the company wanted to continue to implement solutions and approaches to drive that culture even further and even deeper, but at the same time pursue a growth strategy, a strategy that could materially change the size of the business. And that's a big challenge for HR people at times, because as the company scales and you take on additional mass, you bring on people from other organizations, you increase your footprint geographically, it's hard to maintain that staple culture that you have, where you feel like you want to feel like a small company, but have the capability of a big company, right?
You almost need a different type of cult. Like I was talking about this recently. You know, one particular culture may get you to this certain point, but you may need a different type of culture in order to scale the business in the way that you're talking about and grow it. So that's a very different, but it's a real challenge keeping and balancing all of the great attributes of that culture, but with more of the growth mindset and perhaps moving the business in a different direction. It may not, be the same. So it's very difficult.
It is difficult, and it's easy just to forget the culture, pursue all those things that are important for growth, bring on new people, increase the mass and capability of your BD organization, take on new space and so on. It's easy to do all of those things, but maintaining that identity, that DNA, that culture that means so much to people, high performing and the rest of the workforce, that's the real trick. And that's hard to do. And a lot of organizations have a difficult time bridging the gap between current state and where we're going. It's just a big trick, and it's not something that you do in a vacuum from HR. Your role is to help provide leadership and a blueprint for how you're going to do that, but the execution comes through your management team.
Through them, exactly. Yeah. Culture doesn't belong to HR.
No, it doesn't. I mean, if it did, we might see different results across the landscape, but
yeah. So what steps have you taken so far? You've been there in a year and a half, right? What were the sort of initial steps you took when you first came in to where you are now, sort of to more roll things out?
So with the initial steps, I took a framework that was already in place and made sure that we inculcated that into the culture, and we put a stake down to make sure that those cultural initiatives were codified and remained important. And those are things such as, we're very big on communication. So we have people that work all across the country and some people internationally, but we like to make sure that people feel as though they can have a real-time, immediate communication with the folks that they need, and at any level. So we're an open door policy kind of company. I sit next to the CEO in the office here, and he gets calls from people from coast to coast and at all levels. And that's the culture that we like to have. So to make sure that we had the tools and we were communicating with employees that this is part of our culture and this is okay to do. Other things that we've done is we've emphasized and have funded things like employee socials. Little things like once a month, get out of the office, go down the block to the local, watering hole or what have you, socialize outside of work.
That's what everyone's missing right now, Curt.
I know it is. And we've tried to substitute that with the virtual thing, which has mixed results. But again, that's very important to us. It's important that we have multiple times a year, we have ceremonies where we recognize employees for their contributions. We do the Employee of the Year. And this is stuff that a lot of companies.
But it's just that's what makes up the culture. Is those that you were talking to me about before. I know you're not going to sort of talk. You didn't want to talk about too much because the work you're doing now is reflected in what's happening with all of your employees that are working from home. I asked you before this call how things going, and you were like, well, great, really, because which is it's because you already have that culture of constant communication. You have the systems, tools, processes in place already. When it came to everyone working remotely, it was a really smooth transition because you were used to having a culture of constant communications, high touch points across the whole business. It made it a lot easier for you, which was really good to hear.
No doubt. And there's another element of it that I have to make sure that I emphasize, and it's that we have the right managers, because this is not what's going on at our company is not the human resources setting up the happy hour after work for our employees in Orlando, Florida, or something like that. And we're managing it. We're setting,
Yeah.
our managers are doing this. They're taking initiative. They make sure that it gets done. They show through their actions that it's an important part of our culture, that we care. We want to get out and socialize with you. And little things like that make a difference. Most of your listeners already do something like this. I get it. This is nothing revolutionary or innovative. It's the execution that makes a difference. Is it getting done? Are we communicating, making sure that you understand that this is important to us, that you have communication means internally, and we want you to use them, and that we care about you enough to what we want to, after work, we want you to get out, relax. We recognize that you have a life outside of work. We respect that. But that's a part of it. You know, on this stage of the journey, since we're embarking on rather, I'd say aggressive, although that might not be the right word, but we have a growth agenda in front of us that's going to increase the scale of the company quite a bit. And this is a time where we need to do a little bit better job at making sure that career paths are clear, and that employees understand the circuitry between how we lay out our jobs in a job map and how career paths might work, and journey across those paths, that we have conversations with employees about career options. I happen to work in a company where the demographic leans a little towards a more mature end of the spectrum for age. The average age is around 54.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Not a lot of people are looking for career growth, you know, in terms of title, and it's just not the desire. The desire for a lot of these folks is to make a difference. You know, they come into a company. They want to have a job that's well suited to their needs. They want to be respected and paid equitably. But most importantly is they understand how their efforts contributes to the mission of the customer. And that will be a big emphasis for our company, and a big part of the human capital strategy, and a part of our cultural push going into the latter half of this year and going into next year is recognizing that we need to make sure that we create that line of sight for employees, that they can see the connection between what it is that they do at their desktop, or these days it might be their kitchen table, literally, and the mission of the customer. How is it that what you're doing this morning, what difference does that make to the customer and the individuals that they serve? And that's the kind of stuff that people get excited about, especially in the demographic that I'm talking about. You know, they're not looking to climb the career ladder. They're looking to make sure what they're doing is meaningful,
Yeah.
and they can see that connection. And that will be a big part of our kind of our human capital strategic orientation going further, is to make sure that we clarify that line of sight, so employees can feel engaged and excited about what they do.
Again, that's part of your culture, right? All of these things make up the culture, and having a culture of everyone understanding the mission, the purpose, the why, what my contribution is that was one of the reasons I really struggled in my previous roles as in sales, where I was selling because I was trying to hit a target, right? Trying to hit the next commission bracket, or trying to get the next bonus. And I remember seeing, and I said this a million times on a podcast, to sort of start with why, Simon Sinek TED Talk, and it was what is your why, your purpose? And I looked at my job and I couldn't make that link. And it's really demotivating, because I was like, well, if I'm just doing this just to make some commission, or which is obviously is sales, right? That's one of the main motivations, and to hit a bonus, you know, after a while that kind of wears off. And you're like, you know, what is the real meaning? Why am I getting up out of bed every day, commuting an hour and a half to work and back every day? There's got to be more to it.
Absolutely. Yeah. That gets me to thinking there's a motivational model. I think it's Hertzberg, and there are intrinsic and extrinsic motivators. Or extrinsic are things like pay and position, title, and
Compensation, basically. Yeah.
and that happens to be on the lower levels of Maslow's hierarchy as well. All those things are important, and they have a motivating effect, but they really don't have a transformational effect on employees, an engaging effect, and that's where we would like to be as a company. We create an environment that is very friendly. It is engaging. People like to be here. We were just received notice that we were a Washington Post top workplaces awardee. Just a couple of days ago that came out. So they do surveys here in the Washington, D.C. area to recognize organizations that employees rate is very high at working at. And we want to maintain that kind of environment, that kind of a culture, but we want to transform it and move it just a little bit further downstream, so employees can see exactly what that draw, what that connection is, how they make a difference, and then clarify tools, resources, and other things that we can provide that will even further strengthen that alignment.
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, you're talking about the average age within the organization. Does that make it really tough for you to compete for talent? Or is there what's the reason why it's that number? Is it just the industry, or just out of interest?
It's interesting that you're asking that question. I could see by your reaction when I gave that number that you were a little bit surprised. I think part of it is it's twofold, Chris. First of all, in our industry, it's not uncommon for
defense. Yep.
Yes, for us to hire people that have actually retired from serving in the
I'm with you. Okay.
Or otherwise, and they come out and they already have the subject matter expertise and domain knowledge
and leadership skills.
Exactly. And a lot of the work that we do, our customers like to see people with that maturity and that experience to come in and do work. So.
Okay, well, I suppose there's no shortage of talent then from that perspective. If you're hiring out of former military, people that are serving and have such an incredible set of skills, like anyone that I've ever hired from a military background has always excelled in the businesses I've worked within and hired personally. The leadership skills, everything, to be honest. Talk about being able to operate under pressure and during a crisis, right? That's kind of in the DNA.
Well, that's exactly right. And we recognize that as well. When you bring people in that have retired from the military, they bring with them a certain set of skills, certain set of experiences that really, in many respects, makes them not only immediately productive, but valuable in so many ways, because they bring the coaching and leadership skills, the problem-solving skills, the issue resolution, the analytical skills. So they bring a lot of very, very valuable skills to the table that most employers love to have. There's a lot of competition for people that come out of the military because of that, as well as their subject matter expertise in the systems that we work on. And so, yeah.
I was just wondering, given the fact you're a technology organization, that was a bit more of the shock. Because when I think of technology, I think in coders, programmers, young techie guys. That was like my unconscious bias and it coming to my mind. But given your industry, the clients that you face, it makes complete sense.
And that is not unique to our company. My last employer, also a defense contractor, although we didn't do technology, we did what we would call programmatic types of services. Average age was the same. So here we might be hiring computer programmers, database administrators, systems engineers. The last company, cost analysts, and contract specialists, and so on. Different skill set, but the same phenomenon. The rotational thing where people come out of a career in the military and they come into your organization, and they're not ready to retire.
Yeah, but it's great to know that there's companies like yourselves out there though that have that both. It's a win-win. It's just a win-win for everyone involved. So it's pretty cool to to hear. So what does the next sort of 6 to 12 months look like for you then in the business? What are the main priorities? Have they shifted given current events, or is it, or nothing's changed? No, really.
Yeah, I think they'll shift a little bit. As far as current events go, the main catalyst for the changes that we'll make in human resources within my organization is to focus on those 2, 3, 4 priorities that really will serve as a driver to help the company achieve its strategic goals and mission. Recruiting always remains a priority in my business. And it will be for the next the rest of the year and beyond. What we provide intellectual capital to our customers, so recruiting is always a very important task that we perform, and it's very competitive. We'll continue to look at recruiting to make sure that we're sourcing and bringing candidates in the right way, but equally important, we're going to look at how we're onboarding people and that transition from outside the organization to coming in. That's a key thing that we'll need to do. That's a key driver of retention, especially in our industry. When you bring people in after a career in public service and they come into private industry, it's a lot different. It's a lot different coming into a private organization, and we need to spend time and make sure that we provide the resources and so on to folks that come in to help them with that transition. Career pathing, career development, and performance feedback, those conversations, those are going to be really important items for us going forward in light of our current strategy or our strategy refresh. A lot of organizations have dispensed with the old performance appraisal systems and have moved towards more conversational system. That's a direction that we would like to pursue here as well. Again, given the demographic that we have, different demographics, even that affects the way people like to receive feedback. And most of us in that more mature demographic just want to make sure that we have the right priorities, what we're producing meets customer and manager expectations, and given feedback if we need to make a course correction or how we can do things a little bit better, but not wait until the end of the year to get a 2, 3, 4 and told what our pay increase is.
Yeah, that's definitely, the days of that is certainly gone. I know already you've made the decision that for anyone who can work remotely, which is still a fair decent chunk of your employees, you've said to them, work at home until you're comfortable to come back, which I think is a great decision given the fact that there's different circumstances for everyone. There can't really be a one size fits all approach for this, right? Or here's a date. You got to be back by this date, because it's quite tough given people having, like, no matter self with kids have kids at home, or they're caring for parents, stuff like that. Is that gone smoothly as it can, I suppose, as it can so far?
I think it has. Look, the key things to us, the important things to us, first of all, employee welfare. That truly is important to us. We don't want our people exposed to any risk of getting a virus or their family. And we don't want them to have anxiety over being put in a position where that could potentially happen. So we want you to work remotely, especially if that's what you're most comfortable with. And that's key to us. The next thing is just being able to having the tools and resources to be able to do your job. And we do a pretty good job of that, providing, the electronic tools and the equipment and so on to make those things happen. So here in my area in Virginia, as in most states in the United States and probably countries around the world, we have this gradual phased in approach to people coming back into the public domain and to work. Where I'm at in Virginia, we just hit phase 2, which means you can go into restaurants and not have to wear a mask, or you can go into church, and there are seating restrictions, but the restrictions are gradually being lifted. What we're doing as a company is we're keeping an eye on that. but we're not telling people they have to come back to the office.
Yeah.
I'm in the office today, thus my lines behind me here.
Did you ever leave? Have you been in the office the entire time? I didn't ask you that before.
Oh, no. I left the office on March 23rd.
Mm-hmm.
Last week was the first day that I came back.
Okay, because you are an essential business, right? So you carried on working though as an organization throughout the entire time.
Exactly. And I was able to do my job from home, and it was very transparent where I was at because of the tools we have. But yeah, we're not going to require employees to come back. We don't have any plans to do that yet because of the type of work that we do. Some of our customers will require employees to come back to the workplace, and in those instances, we'll work with the customers and employees to affect that transition. But
yeah,
company, no requirements at this time. I'm in today. There's another guy that's here. I was in last week, and I was the only one here, and it's just
really,
yeah, and that's fine. And that was my expectation. Don't come to work. I just think my wife and I have been the two.
She's sick of you, like my wife. She's like, get out of the
house. and that's exactly right. And
she's here. My wife's parent, mum's here today, and her sister, and she's never been happier not to see me. She's just having a great time with them. She's probably going to be upset when I get off the show with you that I'm back at this point as well. And I love this. You also told me as well that you said that given your industry, a lot of times it's like you have to be seen, especially with the government contracts, defense. It makes sense. But you're saying to me how in the past there's certain clients that you thought you could never do it remotely, but you're now finding out that actually we can. We do it. The only reason we didn't do it before is because that's the way we've always done it. Not because we can't do it or that it's the right way and the most productive way, but it's just that was what it works. So is that an eye opener for you and the leadership team to see, look, actually, we don't really need to be on site every single time. We can do these remotely. And also, does that then open up a talent pool for you as well? Or people that you could perhaps hire outside of your normal geographical location in terms of a global marketplace? Is that something you've looked at all?
Yes. Well, first of all, it has been an eye opener, not just for Ray and our leadership and our employees, but for our customers as well. I mean, some of our customers that never would have entertained a remote working situation were forced into it. And the only way that they could was to have people work remotely. So some of them, it was a little bit of a challenge for them to go ahead and accept that and to work with it, but they all did eventually. And it'll be interesting to see what happens as we start to transition back in, whether those same customers will be a little bit more flexible on the remote work arrangement. Some of our customers are very flexible. We're already. We'll see if within our market that changes and that philosophy broadens a little bit. It's interesting that you bring up the access to the talent pool. Very insightful comment on your part. Yes, indeed. When you can have remote work arrangements, it definitely opens up a much broader talent pool to you, and which is helpful for us for recruiting purposes. Because if we don't have to have people who work on base in one location or another, they can work from home somewhere else in another state. It just gives us much more flexibility to look for the kind of talent that we need. Yeah. And it's an interesting phenomenon. When we talk about this, I think about remote working, at least the scale that we have today, wasn't possible just a few years ago.
Yeah.
Now with the evolution in tools, it's just amazing what people can do working remotely. I'm just astonished anymore the kind of work people can do working from home.
You were saying to me as well that productivity is increased. Before, a lot of people were worried about productivity during this. I've seen the same thing for my team and even myself personally, because there's less meetings you're being pulled into. You don't need to be in, less calls, less distractions. Perhaps to maybe having at work. I feel like I'm working too hard, too much at home. I'm actually having the opposite issue. I think many people are having burnout. that they're doing too much. I'm finding, so we need to find a balance.
I think you're right. I've seen research that suggests that very thing, that people can get burnout because instead of hopping in the car and driving an hour in the morning to go to work, they're starting to work earlier.
Or not having that lunch break, right? Or that hour long during the day where they actually go for lunch with their peers and actually take a break out. Those natural breaks that just happen throughout the day, they no longer exist. It kind of blends. I didn't even realize it was Friday today.
Yeah. Well, that's not my problem. I find that I'm in the pantry every hour when I work.
Oh, I'll try.
That's one of the reasons I didn't like working from home before this whole pandemic hit. But
yeah, we're doing our best. Well, look, I'm conscious of time, but I appreciate you taking the time out to join us. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you and getting to know you. Right, for everyone who's listening on LinkedIn, we connected on LinkedIn a few weeks ago, right? Never spoken before, and here we are. Live on LinkedIn. That just shows you the power of technology. To your point, I can't even imagine going through something like this, like the last crash that we went through, without things like Microsoft Teams, Zoom, and other sort of technologies.
I know, you're right.
As well. So that's something that it would be pretty crazy to go through that, and not or a pandemic, should I say, where we're pretty fortunate from that perspective as well, that we do have the system that's all in place. But before we wrap up, I'm going to go into our quick fire round, Curt. I know you wasn't expecting this. I'm going to keep you off guard. Everyone listening, they know what's coming. I'm going to ask you 5 questions, and you have no longer than 30 seconds to give us some amazing answers.
30 seconds each?
Yeah, 30 seconds each. Yeah, not for 5 questions. That would be pretty tough.
Okay.
So number one, what was the sort of number one thing that was holding you back from becoming a senior, a chief HR officer? What was the biggest sort of challenge?
Willingness to let go of what I was accustomed to and pursue opportunities to stretch and my wings and grow. I've always been a subject matter expert in the HR area, or at least I would consider it, and love being a subject matter expert that gets their hands dirty. I like being in the trenches, but for a while it took me, I had to think, look, this is good, but I need to take this knowledge and move to a different plateau so I can make a greater impact. And I was holding myself back. It wasn't.
Yeah, pretty common, right? Because that's what you're comfortable with and what you know. And taking that next leap of faith is always nerve-wracking and scary. But it's normally the right thing to do. When it's scary and it doesn't feel good, it's probably the right thing. Normally, that's the thing you need to run towards.
That's exactly right. You're right.
Yeah. What's the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
These are great questions.
Caught you off guard.
That's fine. These are terrific questions. and unscripted, I'd say probably the best piece of advice is, just to be yourself and retain those solid values that make a difference. Honesty, trust, integrity. Those are things that matter. People recognize those traits in other folks, and when they recognize those, people become comfortable working with you, and they open up to you, and they're open to forming relationships and with you, and those relationships make a difference for your success and the impact that you can have on a company and on other people. So, I just think having been instilled with those values and retaining those was helpful to me, and I think it could be helpful to other people as well.
I completely agree. And that took me a long while, actually, to be my true, authentic self. We're seeing it play out a lot during lockdown now, aren't we? With a lot of leaders being seen on Zoom at home with their families and their kids running around, and we're kind of getting to know each other in a whole new way. And we're all human, right? We all have good days, bad days, right? And it's important that we be vulnerable and supportive at the same time. So
it absolutely is, Chris. You're right.
Yeah. What's one book do you recommend to our audience, and why? Or it could be any book, to be honest, not just a HR one.
Wow. Okay, so I tend to be a big time book consumer, and personally, I like history, American history kind of books. But let me think back on my current readings here.
That's what happens whenever I ask someone who's a keen book reader that question. They're like, "You want me to choose one book?" Out of everything I know. If not, you can tell me later, and I can copy it in the comment section for everyone, because I kind of caught you off guard and give you time to grab another one.
Well, that would suggest that I haven't read books, and I'm trying to think of a title of something that. No,
well, I know you're a big book reader. You said that in our last conversation, so just.
Yeah. So I just put in a plug, and I'll think of some books that have been impactful for me. And I know that you have an association with Dave Ulrich.
Yeah.
And some of Dave's book, Human Resource Champions, that he's written over the years, to me have been very influential for me personally, and have given me great insight on the kind of traits and so on that are important for human resource people to really make an impact.
Yeah. Especially as a foundation, like, you know, if you're like it's super, so many CHROs I speak to who kind of quote that book. Obviously we've gone a long way since then, evolved, but it's a foundational book that everyone really should read in HR. It always will be there.
Yes, indeed.
As well. What about sort of internet resources? You know, what kind of social networks do you use, or online, you know, websites you use to stay up to date with current events? What's sort of on your what's in the browser?
You know, to be honest with you, the Employment Law Review and other portals from our benefits vendors and our legal advisors are typically where I spend my time. I have a particular fascination with the law.
Of course you do.
Well, and it's just
surprised, Curt, that you have a fascination with law at this point. I shouldn't be surprised, should I?
No, but it's not just because of the law and the impact on our field, but so I'm one of those people that
that's what I meant. I know where you're going with this. You just
I like good writing, right? And reasoning. And when you read legal opinions, they're very, you know, they're structured in a way, they're presented in a way, they're written in a way that's very insightful, very captivating. And I like that, right? I tend to be a big critic of how people write. It's one of my.
I need someone like you in my business, because myself and Ivan are the opposite of that. And we need more people like you.
Okay. No, you don't want to hear me complaining, but so I like I tend to follow resources and blogs provided by like our brokers and our
stay close to the business as well, I'm assuming. So you want to, yeah. And I know obviously on LinkedIn, because that's where we connected.
Exactly.
As well. And last question before I let you go for your weekend: what's one thing about your business that you're most excited about?
I'm most excited about the impact that we have on the men and women that are serving our nation. They have tough jobs, and sometimes the work of our men and women in uniform, and those not in uniform but the civilians, their efforts and their contributions goes unnoticed a lot of times. And I'm proud to be with a company that makes a tremendous amount of effort to make sure that our customers have the tools, resources, know-how to support, to do a very demanding and difficult job. And I'm proud to work with hundreds of employees that make a commitment to ensure that our customers have the tools and support that they need to do their jobs. We really are passionate about that. At the core, it's a key part of our DNA and our culture and strategy. And to me, it's the right spot to be in. It's a great company, and we have the right purpose and mission. And so I love that.
Super exciting. It makes sense why you get out of bed every day to do what you do, right? Not only are you serving them, but you're also then employing them. So it's, you know, it's an incredible that you do. But thanks again. It was a pleasure having you on the show. Have a good weekend, and I wish you all the best until next week. Okay.
Same to you, Chris. Thanks for having me on. It's a great show. You're very good at what you do, and I appreciate the opportunity.
I appreciate it.
Have a good weekend as well, you and Ivan.
All right. See you later. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.